Okay. Unit 7, lesson 71. We're going to cover population genetics, which is actually pretty brief. Then we're going to go over the 5 factors that drive evolution. And if we have time, I'll get into what Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is. And that's going to be on the next few lessons. You guys are going to have to learn all about Hardy-Weinberg. I would strongly encourage you to be here every day that we do that. That's going to be on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. I can help you if you're here, but if you're not here, obviously I'm not there to answer questions. So try to be here. It can be a tricky equation if you don't understand it, just like any equation is. All right, well, the first thing that I wanted to define for you is the population. And this is something that you're going to see in ecology next unit, which, by the way, that's your last unit. You're getting close to being done. A population is all members of a species that occupy an area at the same time. Give you guys a moment to write that down. All right. Gotta go check on something. I'm back. All right. So the example I want to give you is what I just showed you from first period. Here's a little map of South Tampa if you've never looked at it from a satellite. You know, here's Davis Island. There's Harbor Island. Some of you live there. Here's MacDill Air Force Base. Robinson High is right here. Plant High is right here. Jefferson High is right here. And Blake High School is right here. Now, all of these schools are in different locations, but they all have humans. But these humans are in different areas. These are going to be 4 different populations of humans. Let's make that clear. There are 4 different populations of Homo sapiens. We're all Homo sapiens. But what if I told you this? Blake High School is very, very hot, very, very dry, and has no predators. Okay. Robinson High is very, very tropical, very rainy, and there's like 2 apex predators that live in that environment. Flash forward 50 million years from now. Will the humans at Blake High School evolve under the same pressures as the students at Robinson High School? No. This is known as population genetics, where if you are under the same circumstances, then you're going to evolve the same. But if you're the same species, but exposed to different pressures, you could evolve along different lines. Is this an example of micro or macro evolution? If you're different pressures, despite the fact you are currently the same species, would result you to diverge into different species. That would be macro. Now, maybe these populations have a lot of diversity, which I'm sure they do, and some in that diversity is what can give some individuals an advantage over their competition. And this is something that Charles Darwin really stressed. Darwin stressed that diversity exists among members of a population. I look around this room, I see 34 Homo sapiens, and you guys are all different. If I put a police lineup of all 2,500 students at Plant High School, I could easily see Trey. I could easily see Megan out of all of you. You're all different. We made technology that is predicated on that. When you look at your phone, it opens up. That's facial recognition. This is all microevolution. Now, because of this, a population can have many subpopulations. Think of humans. Think of a human from Ireland. Think of a human from India, Ethiopia, a Native American from Oklahoma, Japan. We're all humans, but we're all different. These can be considered subpopulations. Other words for subpopulations can be ethnicities, races, even breeds, like with dogs. A golden retriever is the same species as a French bulldog. Yes, they are. They could have puppies, and those puppies could have puppies. They're the same species. But a golden retriever is definitely different than a French bulldog. They're a subpopulation. In the animal kingdom, there is Panthera tigris, a tiger. There are 7 subpopulations of tigers in the world. It's not just tiger. There's actually 7 different types. We call those breeds or subpopulations, subspecies. That's another one. I almost forgot that. Subspecies. They're completely compatible. Their offspring are compatible, but there's definitely differences within the population. They have many genotypic and phenotypic differences. Now, last couple of years, we had a little COVID pandemic. I don't know if you heard of it. And what if there was research done to find out how much did COVID affect the DNA of the infected? Would it be fair if we only studied the DNA of Canadians? No, because the DNA of Canadians is different than the DNA of Chinese. The DNA of Chinese is different than the DNA of Kenyans, and so on. I could do this all day. South Africans, Japanese, Russians, etc., 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 Mexicans, Guatemalans, Brazilians. Okay. So what scientists do to be accurate with their research is they actually test every ethnicity. You know, there's a reason why HIV affects Africans more than most other ethnicities. There's just a vulnerability in their DNA that leads to greater effects and greater rates of infection. And different populations have other issues, depending on what the disease or the virus could be. So the point here, guys, is that every ethnicity on Earth, whether you're a human, whether you're a lion that lives in Kenya versus Tanzania, they might have little tiny differences that makes them different. And I thought of this earlier while I was getting this lesson ready for you. How many of y'all saw Avatar, The Way of Water? Okay. I'm going to pull something up here online. I'm going to share my screen with the YouTube video. So let's see if I can remember how to do that. Check it out. Let's see. I'm going to look up Na'vi. I think that's how you spell it. Forest tribe. Now, they were featured mostly in the first Avatar. That's where Jake Sully's family is from. You know, Neytiri. They're kind of a darker blue. There they are. But then when you watch The Way of Water, were the water Na'vi different? Yeah, they were a lighter shade of blue. They had webbed hands and fingers. Their tail was wider, which was better for swimming. They could hold their breath longer. That they're both Na'vi. They're the same species, but were there differences in their ethnicities? Yes. And what drives that? The environment that they evolved in. The ones from the first Avatar evolved in the forest. These water Na'vi, they evolved on the beaches and out in the open on the water. I bet in future, I think the director said in future movies, they're going to show other ethnicities of this species. So that's just an example of them actually applying this to what we're talking about here in class. All right, moving on. This is all a result of what we call SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms. These are DNA sequences that are different by one nucleotide. Okay. So let's say that I have a Brazilian. They're a Homo sapien, but they're from Brazil, South America. And let's say that I have someone who's Japanese on the other side of the world. The Brazilian has the following sequence: ACGT, ACGTA. The Japanese has ACG, TAC, CTA. I'm sure you can see the difference. And you may think, oh, that's a mutation. Well, not, it is, but not in the way that you might think. That difference leads to genetic diversity. This doesn't affect the amino acid. But it is a source of genetic diversity. I want to explain to you guys why genetic diversity is so important. Max, can I pick on you for a second? Appreciate it. Guys, let's say that we all had the same genetics as Max. We're all identical. We have the same DNA down to every single base pair that he has. Max is absurdly vulnerable to the flu. In fact, Max has a rare condition in which if he gets the flu, he dies. If we're all the same, what does that tell you about all of us? Yeah. If we get the flu, we're dead too. Here's another one. Max has a gene that makes his flesh extra tasty to a predator. What does that say for all of us? We're all tasty. So, evolution really can't happen if there's no differences. If Serena has a mutation that makes her flesh like extra disgusting to a predator, that's a benefit for her. She's not going to be eaten. That's natural selection. So all the Maxes are going to probably get picked off, and that's going to pave the way for all the Serenas to take over. They're not vulnerable. That's evolution, and that's driven by natural selection. So populations are the same species, but you can have different traits in different populations. And I think a great example that's more recent for you guys is Avatar. You got the Na'vi in the forest, you got the Na'vi on the beach. They're the same species, but there's differences within that species. It's no different than saying a Brazilian person or a Japanese person. They're both Homo sapiens, but there's definitely differences there. And it's due to these little single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are little tiny differences. They're not enough differences to make you a different species, but they are enough differences to make you diverse from members of your own population. Are there any questions about this with population genetics? If there are none, then let's move on to the second part of my lesson for you guys today. The 5 factors that drive evolution. And this is kind of a preview for Hardy-Weinberg. That is that big equation that you'll need to definitely understand starting next week. Okay. What is that one aspect that is critical for evolution to happen regarding your genetics? If you don't have this, there is no evolution. Mutation. That's going to be the first one. These are permanent changes to the genetic code. Without mutations, there could be no inheritable phenotype diversity among members of a population. And therefore, the consequence of that is we're all the same. And that would be pretty much the end of our species if we were all the same. It's not going to work. Okay, the next one is non-random mating. Hey, Lindsay, you going to prom?
Yes.
You going with anybody? Okay. Let's say they are going to ask you, and you are going to either say yes or no. Let's say that you have accepted a request to be someone's prom date. Why did you say yes? What would drive a person to say yes to a promposal or something like that? Okay. What if you were to say no? And what are some things that maybe you would like or not like? Like appearance,
Sure, yeah.
attitude, sense of humor, things like that. Intelligence, I'm sure. When we are finding a mate, this is what we don't do. Okay, here's how I find my prom date. I'm just gonna get on my chair here, and whoever I bump into first is you're it. We don't do that because there are individuals that have desirable traits, and then there are individuals that have undesirable traits. That's just natural selection. So in non-random mating, you are specifically picking a partner for a reason, not just randomly. So this is selection of mates according to certain genotypes and phenotypes. We're all different. Next one, number 3, gene flow. Gene flow is also migration. This is the movement of alleles between populations. Jack, do you happen to know what your ancestry is?
No, I'm German.
Anything else? You're not sure? Anybody know what they are and if it's more than one thing? What are you, Olivia? Portuguese, which is in Europe. What else? You're Norwegian too? I am too. I had a kid last period. It's like the same thing I am. I was kind of grossed out because the kid bothers me. So Portuguese, Norwegian, anything else? Irish. Okay. Why are you multiple things? How did that happen? So is Norway, Portugal, and Ireland are all separate countries. How in the world did sometime in the past, how did a Norwegian and a Portuguese meet? They migrated. They met each other. Maybe they just crossed paths. Would you expect in nature to ever find a polar bear and a panda bear in the same place? No, because polar bears are in the North Pole, panda bears are in China. They're separated so far, but what if they migrated and they crossed their genetics with each other? That's called gene flow. So I have a little analogy for you guys. You don't need to draw this, but here's an island and there's nothing but blue parakeets. Here's an island over here. There's nothing but green parakeets. That's not green. green parakeets. And for generation after generation, blue made blue, made blue, made blue, made blue. Green made green, made green, made green. And then just one day, a few birds decided to fly in a random direction, and they ended up on a new island. The island was already inhabited with blue parakeets, and then they reproduced with each other. That is the crossing of the gene pools. That is an introduction of a new gene into the gene pool. So let's say in Olivia's past, let's just say that her whole family is Portuguese, and then some Norwegians showed up out of nowhere, and the Portuguese go, well, hello. Now you have the crossing of the gene pool, and you're introducing Norwegian genes into the Portuguese gene pool, and vice versa. You're introducing Portuguese genes into the Norwegian gene pool. That's gene flow. So to continue that, these are new or rare alleles that are brought into the population. This changes the frequency for future generations. All right. 3 down, 2 to go. Next is going to be genetic drift. Genetic drift is random changes in the allele frequency of a gene pool. This is due to pure chance. I'm going to give you an example. It's kind of a mean example, but I'm still going to do it. All right. This Plant High School has 8 blonde males over 6 feet tall. You're one of them. You all eat lunch at the same table. An asteroid comes. They're all dead. Before, here was the ratios or the frequencies of people at the school. Let's say that we had blondes that were short. They represented 95%. Blondes that were tall, they represented 5%. This asteroid hits the table, wipes out all the tall ones. Are the percentages the same? No. Short is now 100%. Tall is 0. This is called genetic drift. They're random changes to the frequency of traits, and it's due by pure chance and is most likely often caused by disasters. Maybe it's caused by predators, but you're changing your frequency. And by the way, there's also something called the law of large numbers. What would be more noticeable? 8 out of 10 or 80? No, what am I trying to say? 8 out of 10 or 8 out of 100? 8 out of 10. So this is also more noticeable in smaller populations. Okay, there's 2 additions to this I want to go over. One is called the bottleneck effect. This prevents the majority of genotypes from reproducing. Here's another really bad example. I watch you guys walk in and out of South Hall. It can be really tough because it's a huge crowd of people. Let's say that an asteroid hit South Hall and only 20 students survive. They're able to get out of South Hall before the entire building is destroyed. Whose genetics would you expect to see in future generations that play in high school if you guys lived here forever? The survivors. That's the bottleneck effect. The bottleneck effect basically states that only the survivors of a natural disaster, for example, would actually have their genetics seen in future generations. You can't reproduce and pass on your genes if you're dead. This has happened many, 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 many times in history, both naturally and then human derived. The other one is called the founder effect. The founder effect is where specific alleles occur at a higher rate in an isolated area versus the general population. If any of you have ever been out on a boat in Tampa Bay, there's a man-made island in Tampa Bay called Beer Can Island. And imagine that some redheads in South Tampa decided to start a new population in Beer Can Island. And on that island, it is 90% orange hair. Here at Plant, it is not whatever number I said, 90% is probably more like 5%. That is the founder effect. If these people settle on a new island and they start a new population, whose genetics will be in future generations? The founders of this population. This is seen in Pennsylvania with the Amish. Okay, and I'm almost out of time, so let's try to get this one in there. Natural selection. You guys have known this one all too well by now. Environmental selection of organisms most fit to what? Don't say survive. Reproduce. All right, we'll have to stop there.